Hello everyone. Today's talk is a very important one because I will be communicating the importance of the prophets of Starlight. And of course this is poetic imagery, but I'm hopefully putting it out there as some kind of metaphor for a certain sense of existential awareness. We don't want to call it enlightenment or nirvana, we just want to call it you knowing more about just what you are, and it's actually you're doing all the stuff. In other words, I'm just a mirror that's speaking. However, it's very important to see that before we even look at others or try to even listen to others, we have to actually look at what we think. So let's say if you literally tomorrow you woke up and you were just a new person, but you were still you would see that you would have to just sit down and just observe and see how you're absorbing life. Because sometimes the way you're absorbing life is not really you. So like the way you're experiencing life, that's not your actual experience. So what that means is a part of you is like stuck in this actor dilemma, but this dilemma is actually just a natural movement. You need to see that there is no actor, you're just some guy moving around. Do you know? It's the actor is the consideration of a self that is arrogant of its absolute nature, and that is why there's illusion. So what that means is that if you don't have a mirror, you might think you have a hat on when you don't. And we're not that interested in fashion in that sense. The prophets of Starlight simply suggest all those human beings and simply self-aware beings who understood the value of what the imagery of a star and its light suggests. Because where is our sight coming from? How are we aware of anything? And so we see it's from light. And so our light comes from a star. And so when we really look at it, we are kind of like memories of Starlight. Whereas if this aspect of a spectrum that's just aware of the spectrum in this kind of modality, it's as if like we are so much more intelligent than everything around ourselves that it's as if we are the alien to every other species on this planet. As if every other species is wondering, wow, what kind of aliens are these people? They call themselves human beings. So there's that difference in intelligence. So similarly, for man, he will also see that his sense of alienation is by another greater sense of intelligence. So you don't need to be overwhelmed by things that are beyond you. You need to simply be aware of what you are and see that that sense of being will guide you towards your confrontation. So at times it's not just like trying to sit down and make a to-do list of, okay, I need to go do this and do this and do this and then to confront this aspect. It's not like homework. It's not a project you're doing. It is not something that needs to have a certain architecture. It's simply you're observing it, and in that observance there's an allowance for you to be more than what you have seen. And so you truly become an experience of the novelty that doesn't carry anything, so it's kind of like a nothing experience for you. But then you come back, and so you're aware that your reality is meaningful as it is kept present, as it is made aware of, as how the light of a star has even entered your eyes to create such a creation based on the sciences of biology. So you need to see that it's not that just language is hollow. It's that relationship that we have to language as awareness to form is simply also a relationship that we are in. So it's like that moment where man thought he was the God. He suddenly looked around and he's like, wait a minute, I'm also, not a God, I'm small. So it's like, as if one way you're allowed to look at reality in the multidimensional sense of, for example, mankind splitting up an atom. As in, you're like such a God, you have just opened up this matter. You have opened up this reality, matters have gone beyond, measure. And you simply see, and there's also one view where you suddenly see you're so infinitesimal to all this vastness. that there wouldn't even be enough Googleplexes to suggest how we are. So it's kind of like as above, so below. So we see that God that we thought we were in one dimension of reality is actually that we are actually the creation of a greater creator, which as if we are in the eyes of another creator, So you realize as the moment of being you are, and it's really healthy to acknowledge yourself as a moment of being. Because when you say as a human being, then you're in a sense keeping that projection of imagery. If you just say that, if they ask you what are you or who are you, I'm like, I'm a moment of being. That's it. That's the simplest definition. I'll probably put it on my LinkedIn. What are you? A moment of being. But again, this is simply suggesting how this awareness to self gives you a realization of the nature of reality having a very beautiful aura, because that aura is light. It's light playing with itself. And so it's as if just like how we have opened our eyes and this world is present, it's as if we are present in another gaze of a greater being, as if a greater being, which is the collective awareness of all existence, is observing in the way that we are being kept individual. So that if I'm looking at that mug is in my awareness, it's real for me. So similarly, if another being is looking at me, regardless of my awareness, if that being is aware that I'm here, I exist. So we are creating not just an awareness to our moment of existence, but seeing that our moment of existence is the same moment of existence as everything else. And so in that sense of understanding, you're no longer looking for conception, because linearity brings conception, but conception does not completely flow nature's path. In other words, nature's winds can never be copied. And so we don't want to create a technology that is inferior to man's mind, because you see that science is very helpful in communicating certain aspects of the physical dimension, but in the fluctuations of the physical dimension, it's not allowing observances. So people who only believe in science do not even give themselves the permission to even be close to the reality of there being something more than that. But you will see, regardless, because it's a being, because it's not like that you're a scientist, you're considering yourself as a scientist based on how you're aware of yourself in that sense of period, in that sense of life. But you will see that after that phase, you will see that you will get tired of carrying the same information which you thought was the only truth. And so your relationship with ideology becomes really what's important. So it's not that you should go try to become smarter than someone, or try to, outwit people, or try to say that, oh, I know it all or something, as many dictators have done. They have dictated what they know. But many wise men have actually told you that to do the opposite brings a profound sense of a blessed life. And what that means is that the minute you're able to be the silence among all the noise, there's no heaven or, in a sense, earth. You are all that is. And so it's very important, because you can totally go into a hellish-like experience. A hellish-like experience is one where the duality is so confused that it thinks it can be punished. A being who thinks it can be punished is a being who chooses to remain in a dynamic where their psychology is receiving how the unknown may be communicating to them. So what that means is I may be sitting, and a wind may hit me, right? Now, if this wind hits me, someone may tell me, oh, no, those were the spirits, Another one would just tell me, oh, no, it's just air. Do you know what I mean? But when I look at it, I do not just see how all these potentials are possible. I see how the potential of it not being there is possible too. And so it's as if the artist, the painter, in this whole time that it's been just hurriedly painting, suddenly stops painting and realizes it could always put down the brush, but it's also held it for a reason. And so it's kind of that moment, and this is very crucial, because in a person who's pursuing this realization, which will lead eventually to how I'm building up to the concept of the prophet of Starlight, is actually how a being is moving beyond their ideology into a greater awareness, self-awareness, and dimension of experience of their own life. So what that means is that, for example, when you were 5 years old, your awareness of things was much different than when you were, let's say, in your 20s. So it's very important for you to be aware that it is not that just your shape has changed and that your memory is a new refabrication in the moment. It's just that existence is being kept in your reality beyond you thinking about it. And when you see that, you become such aware of that beautiful concept. In other words, when you see someone talking about the creator, the concept of a creator without beauty, that person does not even have any reality close to that idea. They don't even believe in a creator. Because you will see those people who really understand the creator don't even talk about it, which become those mystics who are in the Himalayas. But those who are midway, who see its beauty and they want to communicate it, realize that the closest thing that man has to it conceptually is the concept of love. Because love is an allowance of existence to expand beyond itself. It's that moment when you loved that person, you gave them the permission to move. And so it's not that you're just like allowing a human being to evolve, but you're just observing how the evolution of one man is profundity for others. So what that means is, it's as if you were this sense of a celestial designer and you just simply came into this reality and suddenly you looked at mankind and looked at everything, and in an instant you had to decide what must be done. You would immediately say the word allowance, and you would see that what would happen is that the creator has always given its creation the potential of its gaze. You are made in the image and also in the eyes of a creator if you are following that imagery, because what that symbology means is that your sense of existence knows its sense of non-existence. And so actually when that happens, it's a very, very deep moment. It's that moment where you no longer need to call yourself anything. And so you have become this nameless awareness to life, in which when people look at you, they are just so calm in your presence. It's as if people realize, it's as if this human being has, in a sense, gone through a sense of alchemy, a transformation, as if lead has turned into gold, as if consciousness has remembered nothing. So, now that I've spoken about the eyes of man and how the light is its presence, the prophets of Starlight will be those who will realize that they will be some of the first human beings in this culture and in this society that will be so compassionate. It's as if it's like the minute they're existent, they are just so compassionate to everything, every dynamic of sense of other, that they go beyond their identity. And so these beings will go beyond their identity to a point where they will connect it to its non-existential view. So they will be that awareness, just like how perhaps that bubble at the end of the pot that was boiling just suddenly went up, at that temperature. It's as if you suddenly realize where you are, and where you are is an infinitely moving sense of innate knowing. And so that's why your intuition is valuable, because your intuition is a movement that is always occurring. It's an aspect of you that is aware that you're existing and knows that you're existing. And so it is working with an awareness that is more collective, which goes towards unspeakable realms. And why I'm saying it's unspeakable, because it's yours. It's your internal realm. It's your internal awareness. It's you basking in all your ideologies and seeing if you really feel that's who you are. Or if the light has a quality where you will never know, but you will always be. These people, the prophets of Starlight, will see that they will become human beings where they have reached such a state of collective being, where when you ask them, they are no longer preaching. It's as if they have no longer words, but they're keeping the harmony in this world with their presence and their balance. So it's as if like, it's that moment you suddenly see that the value of that being in front of you or that person was not in how they looked like, but in how aware they were of what was there. Because you can have, for example, the most beautiful girl, the most beautiful woman in front of you, and if she does not know if she is beautiful, then there is a very huge problem, because there's an emptiness in reality. It's as if one has a treasure, but they're not seeing it. It's as if that moment where they said a homeless man sat on this box, and the homeless man asked every person for money, and nobody had money, and one day he asked someone, and the person says, look under that box, maybe there's money there, and the person looks and finds like $1,000. And so what I mean by that is that you need to really be aware of yourself, because there are aspects of yourself that have been growing that you need to just know. Just become aware of yourself, and you will know yourself. And so in a very heavenly way, you shall know thyself. And so to go back to the imagery of how beauty can be lost in its own illusion, it is important, for example, for the male, for the man, to be a very clear mirror in showing the appreciation that he has for a woman, to show them to show her that clarity. It's very important. And so it's such a beautiful romance, because the man becomes a fool in which only the woman can understand. Gosh. Anyways, to get back, the prophets of Starlight really become those beings who are very self-aware. In their self-awareness, they understand that they are an emanation of a greater human experience. So when people look at them, they realize that they are through a different intensity of experience, in that they are much more aware of how they are a creator within this creation. And so as Meister Eckhart has playfully said, the same eyes that he sees God is the same eyes that God sees Meister Eckhart, God sees him. And so what that really means is that there's a moment in your life where you only thought you were a creation that had to choose between heaven and hell, and you're suddenly wondering whether this experience and this existential awareness that you are has the potential to be in the clouds like Zeus. For example, can your experience be so vast that you are the creator of your experience? And so when you realize what meditation has been in human civilization, meditation has simply been like that moment where a human being sat down to observe life, and in that study of life became aware of the nature of reality. And the nature of reality was, in a sense, something that would be always void in language, rationality, and logic. Because when man tries to build bridges, you can't build bridges in everything. Do you know what I mean? You can't build bridges everywhere. You can only build bridges somewhere, and it's useful. If you try to build bridges everywhere around the world, you'll be inefficient, because you could build other stuff. So it's very important to see that you don't need to always have logic and rationality, but only when it's required. And so how do you know when it's required? By allowing your moment to be as it is, and you are simply a flow of natural expression. In the sense that my greatest lesson came actually from plant life, because a tree stood still in a certainty that always was fruitful. Because it knew of the light, it grew in it, it basked in it. We have all grown in sunlight, we have all been part of this world, and it is our illusion in which we think we are not. And so it is very important that we have methodologies in which we can self-reflect. We can just in an instant be like, okay, I'm aware of me, and this is really not the reality that's serving me. It's as if you need to really find those deeper aspects of you, which you call your conscience. Stop calling it your conscience. Go see what it is that you want, And so you can do this by approaching it through a very still and calm manner. So in other words, you want to see that the Zen master was actually a very great being, in the sense that the students were beings who were tired of the normal hologram. It's like they were aware of the same routine, and they were trying to see beyond the pattern. And so when they came to him to say, oh, I want to see beyond the pattern, he's like, no, you're not supposed to see beyond the pattern. You're supposed to observe the pattern you have to such an extent in which then you realize why you need to observe it. And so the students sometimes were rejected. Nowadays people think, oh, these gurus are, these gurus are people who are trying to steal money. No, they're just some people who are like, okay, no, I can't help this guy. Bye, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, it's simply that when you are authentic, the right moments happen. That's it. When you're yourself, you are an existential allowance beyond a conceptualization that's limiting. So the prophet of Starlight, in its remembrance of his essence, will be an advanced communicator, not perhaps through his words, but as its being. So it's like, they're beacons of greater awareness. Simply the presence of these beings is like a generator of awareness, of multidimensionality, But they don't need to say a single word. They could live life like a rock. It's a very profound thing, actually. Because you see, I've observed reality. And so when you look at the physical dimension, how Mr.Within has observed this is that he has seen that physicality is really meaningful when you're observing the change. But in life, we have different focuses of change. For example, just like how a camera can focus in and out, in some aspect of reality can become more real than suddenly others. For example, those people who suddenly go into experiences of, let's say, the Scarface type experience, that becomes real for them. And those people who go into Mother Teresa experience, that becomes real for them. Do you know what I mean? So it's as if like reality is just this picture in which different people are tuning into different parts, and in a sense, they are also colored. So when you try to get an awareness beyond color, when you're actually in the painting, that's kind of insane. But it's an insanity that must be as comfortable as how Alice just went into that rabbit hole. It's that moment where you trust the unknown because there's a greater awareness that is in a sense coming from it as you're going through that journey. Cosmology will show you how the beginning is always the end. But you will at the same time understand that experience cannot be named. So when you think about, oh gosh, what other technology do I use aside from language, aside from association with form, and you're like, gosh, there's nothing. So you'd realize, oh my God, all those people who I thought were my teachers were actually not my teachers. They were just people talking. And I made them into a sense of teacher. I received knowledge. I received it. So you see, it's not that there's ever anything that's wrong about what's happening outside. It's wrong in how you're receiving life. So sometimes you see there's an approach to life that is natural beyond ideology. And what that means is you're simply becoming aware that you are present through a greater movement. So let me say it like this. Let's say I am in the mind of, let's say, in 1,000 years, that the next greatest leader in that time, let's say I'm in the mind of that as a child, right? So let's say in 1,000 years, if the greatest leader of mankind could be present here, if we were alive till then, if we were present, that man who would be that great man, that Martin Luther King of 1,000 years later from now, we would see that in his mind there will come a moment where your voice no longer matters, and sensory perception becomes a bit inferior, because what has become more expansive is your awareness to the seriousness of reality. So regardless of how much I'm enjoying, in blissful experiences, I'm also able completely and comfortably to navigate through chaotic experiences. And what that means is these chaotic experiences are aspects of your own ability to conceive. So like, how some days let's say you're more energetic and you're just more excited and you're just running around a lot. Similarly, some days in your mind, you might not be energetic, but your mind might be excited. And so you see you're diving into thoughts much more deeper, for example. It's as if like on Tuesday you suddenly felt like, a philosopher. And then Wednesday you were just, that simple man looking at a rock. So it's very crucial to know that our awareness shifts, and in that awareness is as if we're like this lens of awareness, and the change of our environments really is what we're associating to then identify self. So we see that psychology does not help you when you cannot find the truth of those words. You can't find what a psyche means. How can you define a psyche? You cannot. You cannot define the unknown aspect of man. And if you do, there's an arrogance there. It's the arrogance of, let's say that it's the arrogance of someone who does not realize what reality they're present in. Some beings in a sense are shot into projections of thinking that by moving around and changing external reality too much, they will free themselves from this reality. And in a sense, ideology is a projection, guys. So like when I say apple, when I say projection, it's like when I say apple, that image of an apple that comes to your mind, that's a projection. It's like I have said a word and literally that is the memory that has come to you. So I see that what words are like these symbols in which each person is individually interpreting and then assuming a certain shape in which it's like through the asking and receiving modality we understand. So like if you're a person, if you've used the sentence, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? You are someone who is communicating. Are you on the same state of awareness? Are you on the same page? Are you on the reality in which these forms are real to you? However, regardless, there comes moments that also carry you. The prophets of Starlight can only be a playful remark of how life, in its utter allowance to become the clarity that is the observance of itself, will be the greatest wisdom found in light, in starlight. And what that means is that external reality is an internal moment of unknown momentum. Reality will communicate to you. Humanity is reaching that point where its awareness to its internal dimensions will make life magical, but you must also have an ability to move beyond that magic. You must have an ability in the sense that if tomorrow's suddenly the eyes from above just came down, if some shiny being came in front of you and said, "Ooh, I'll do this for you and do this for you," you're not that convinced by the external. You are like, I am aware as an internal being, and so there does not need to be a game when I know myself. In other words, people do not need to act when you know yourself. And so knowing yourself means that moment where someone is bullying you, you're not in the dynamic, or someone is fighting with you. Let's say if you're just thrown in that gladiators arena, you do not remain there without movement. And what I mean by that is that you will see that if you are challenged in your physicality, you will give it your all. you will listen to that Al Pacino's talk in the locker room and see that beyond the inches that we can find, you are of infinite unknown potential. Illusion cannot remain when the internal awareness dissolves into the natural phenomena that was an unspeakable moment. Because we're basing our language and our technologies on shape. Man is on this verge where it's like, at this whole time, all its technologies have been based on shape. So it's as if all this existential energy, all the beings being present in their humanity are just thinking about the human form. They've just been constantly thinking, oh gosh, because they're human, right? Because our immediate experience is of the human aspect of ourselves. But if we realize that a tree has many dimensions of intelligence, we realize our multidimensionality is our sense of conception, in a sense of self-communication, that there's a collective sense of being aware of its individuality. Similar to how my finger could be put in, let's say, a fountain, and as it enters that water, it's like that amount of moisture on the finger is like, for example, physical reality. And the minute you take it out, you're simply found in a greater knowing. So it's like many people are like, oh no, after death, what's gonna happen? Oh, that's a lost soul. You know, there's no such thing as a lost soul, because there's no such thing as a soul in the manner that you can shape it to even talk about it. You will see that what you call soul is the deepest aspect within you that leads to a sense of nothing, because you have observed something so deeply. And so there's no need to judge, there's no need to communicate too many external things. Actually, you see a very gentle being is one where is being much aware of its presence in its internal dimensions. When you become still, when you become calm, when you become silent, you will see that it's as if you have been simply found on the greatest mountain peak to have the greatest meditation ever. And so it's as if you're not just alone, but you're alone in the presence of the clouds of the gods. So you do not see the gods, but you see their clouds, for example, if that imagery is nice to you, you know. So you would see that your mind is always in the reach of its greater ability. And so that is simply what I'm talking about. Because the prophets of Starlight are communicators of life. They are, in a sense, being mirrors of existence. Just like Mr.Within, telling not just people, anyone, any being that looks at their being, that the awareness to existence is able beyond its incapability. Because there is no illusion that needs to be there. That's it. You simply remember yourself. I hope in observing your moment of being, you realize that there is something more significant and transcendent than your attitude, than how you're approaching life and your story of life. In other words, you very worried about your job and how other things are happening. That is like, you need to take responsibility for the fact that you are beyond these. You are a being that is able beyond your conception of incapability. Do you know what that means? That means regardless of how much you are simply just observing, in a sense, in a horizontal manner, your ability as a physical form, you are only observing a certain amount of the physical the light spectrum. Your sense of presence is beyond your conception. That's the whole point. And so when your physical sense of presence is beyond your conception, what that means is that you matter and you are aware as a existential intelligence beyond ideology, terminology, and anything that would form a certain shape as thought. There are beyond thought, there are greater planes. And that is why the pilots of consciousness will be present as they have always been. A self-aware being takes himself to the edges of his mind to see that there never was an edge. You simply see that it all originated from here now. The moment of the present moment becomes a sanctuary, guys. What that means is that regardless of how hectic your day is, if you cultivate this ability, you can just throughout the day close your eyes for 2 minutes and be in such a stillness and silence and peaceful observance, where it's as if like that CEO of the company, in just meditating for a little bit, just dissolved into an absolute experience of everything that was happening. So it's like he was not just experiencing it just as this physical form doing all this stuff, but as just the complete awareness to the beauty of what one man can create in his management. So it's very important that we have our awareness in this manner, in the sense that we're aware that beyond matter, there are matters that are unspeakable. And so unspeakable does not mean that there's something hidden or something that's secret. Unspeakable simply means that it is irrelevant to you because you're not aware enough to see its relevance. And so self-awareness is a task that begins with finding a mirror. And your mirror, and the greatest mirror, is always your moment. All wisdom is found within the moment. And so that is where you truly find Mr.Within. Because there's nothing that can be here for too long. So for example, I may watch something that may bother me, like a scary thing or something, or something that is, for example, tragic, or I suddenly accidentally, from the Animal Planet channel suddenly move to, for example, the news, and you suddenly see like the tragedies, right? When that stuff happens, I recognize that there's a beauty in the moment of man's existence where he constantly goes into new modalities. So the next day I totally forget about it and I'm totally doing something else, So your mind is constantly fluctuating. It's like that movement of the golden ratio was really how man's awareness was going. It's like one moment he was aware, one moment he wasn't. It's as if he was being born every time he opened his eyes. And so when we blink, our realities are actually many. For it's at times a chaotic push and pull situation. You are standing in reality, feeling as if you know who you are. You feel you know this. You feel you have had the ability to shape yourself enough to fill an unshaped cup. And so the Zen master has known that the tea ceremony was always beyond the tea. That the awareness of your existence is something beyond translation, and that is the beauty of the silence that walks. That is the elegance you find in an animal. It is not thinking as much as you. It's being. It's being what it is. And sometimes the human being looks at itself and is like, am I being what I am? Like that animal, regardless of my self-awareness. And that human being simply sees that he feels he's not. But when he sees that, who is it that's thinking or feeling? It's actually, there's nothing there, because you dissolve into a moment of holistic experience. It's like when you ask too many deep questions, you become aware of your sense of being as not just the concept of spirit, Like it's not like something that's like, yo, I got a soul, It's that my moment of experience is infinite. And so as it is infinite, all conception can flow in greater paths. So it's like, it's not a person giving you revelation, but someone telling you that how we are designing these bridges through my talks into a sense of multidimensional acknowledgement is actually that we are observing the same thing from as many angles as we can. So that's why human communication is always a contribution, because it is giving awareness of forms that are relevant to humanity. And so how we build these bridges to this greater awareness of multidimensionality is that saying that the bridge is a personal bridge. It is you looking at yourself and being aware of what you are. And in that core, in that moment where you have looked so deeply within yourself that you're like, gosh, it's like, this is really me, you will see in finding a platform of knowing within yourself, within your self-awareness, you will then trust life. Because if someone comes and tells you You know, do you trust me when I tell you, like, for example, this is real, and you're like, I could say yes, man, but I don't. You know, like, you could, if you say that, but suddenly, let's say if you had an experience of that, you know what I mean, and you're like, yeah, man, I totally trust you. You know, you're like, you just had the experience exactly what the guy said. You see, there are two moments that are your same moment of experience, but in one dynamic, you have more existential allowance, and in the other one, you have less existential allowance. So what I'm telling you is that you must find within yourself a sense of awareness, a sense of, like, looking at life that is comfortable to trust life. And as it trusts life, then you will go into your own natural pattern of moving toward this multidimensional awareness. So when I say bridges, I'm being playful. It's actually you becoming aware that you're just like a seed in this reality. And so the seed is sprouting in its time, in its light. Your awareness is reaching a point where your physicality is evolving, in the sense that you're not just like, it's like the evolution is not just, don't think like you'll be like a more evolved looking like human being. It's as if the monkey's understanding was how it turned into human. Do you know? The human's understanding is beyond, is an intelligence beyond that which can be even graphed like Darwin. I mean, I'm hoping Darwin was like, regardless of what I said, I hope these guys totally move past it and find the truth. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure every great writer has some wish that regardless of how many people read their work and truly understand it, that they just get inspired by it. They don't get lost in it, you know? It's like, you don't need to get lost, for example, in reading a Cambridge dictionary to the point that you think you're in Cambridge. You know, it's like you just need to simply look at what you need and just move along, you know. There requires a sense of directness, guys. So it's like, this is simply the process, as Mr. Within could say. There is ignorance. You become aware of your ignorance. You become silent. Ideology leaves. There is no you. There is an awareness of you. There's an awareness of you to all that you can be. There's an awareness to how all that you can be can then be all that it can be. And then there's an awareness to how at first you were nothing. So I want to very playfully, just in the abstraction of the ears that are listening, to simply communicate that if we could visualize the golden ratio and how, like, this sine wave, in a sense, curve, is in a sense at first starting with smaller and then moving into bigger, let's say, sizes. And so what I mean by that is it's like, if we were to look at a toroidal field, we will simply see that there is movement within many senses of position. I want you to visualize the golden ratio vertically. And as you visualize it vertically, visualize that it's just like, it looks like, it's kind of looking like a cone, as if where the tip of the cone is down. So how this golden ratio is that the distance between the waves and the axis is actually reducing as it's coming down, you know. And so the reason I'm showing this is I want to say that you are just a direct awareness. And so if you could be that straight line that looked up through this golden ratio, you would be that you're the awareness of many different horizontal aspects. So the way as consciousness you acknowledge your existence is your intelligence. It's simply how you're looking at the design of life in which you become an emanation of what is your direct experience. So our direct experience, we have thought, is just like, oh, it's like me when I take that psychedelic mushroom or something. No, that's not your direct experience. Direct experience is that moment where you are aware that you exist beyond ideology that could even question experience. The person asking the question dissolves again into actually the forms that came up with the question, you know. It's like that moment where you're like, you can call that a rock and be like, why is there a rock? And then suddenly you see that when you look at why is there a rock, it's as if you've asked the question, why is there external reality? And when you look at why you've asked it, you're like, why did I ask this question? And when you look at it, there's no reason. So you will see that it was all out of a playful sense of consideration that you thought you were in a world that wasn't enough. Become aware of the central sun. Become aware of the center of that which is the origin of your awareness. Become aware of how mankind is reaching a point where it requires imagery that is giving more existential allowance in regards to consciousness exploring itself. So it's totally okay to be creative. It's totally okay to be insane in the healthy manner, of course, as a let's say an artist making the craziest paintings is, So we want to be able, efficient, and we want to be a presence in our environment in which people can be healed in, actually. Think of living your life not as someone that is, oh gosh, I gotta pay the bills, just someone in which wherever you walk, in your presence, people are energized. It's as if like you are not depressed, stressed, you're just such an aware moment, you're just like that graceful yogi and mystic sitting by the stream, and so like your presence is comfortable because its comfort is not based on ideology. It is very important for the children of tomorrow to understand that there's much more than their ideas, much more, and that is why experience is true knowledge, is true wisdom, because experience was that moment where the fighter actually felt the fist of another human being. And so it was then that he actually became a fighter. It was then where the reality of the fight entered. And also, in an instant, of course, the reality could leave because, the fighter could get knocked out. Do not keep a lot of things with you. Travel light, travel as swiftly as your self-awareness. Know that you know. Be as you have been. And walk as you have always walked. For the prophets of Starlight. Always are. They're just here. Blessings to the man who thought he was a seer. The prophets of Starlight have come. Have remembered who they are. Much blessings and namaste.